I'm Dana Perino, and this is Perino on Politics. A disastrous debate for Democrats. Welcome to Perino on Politics, where I call my smart friends and find out what's on their minds about the state of American politics. And today joining me is co-founder of South and Hill Strategies, Colin Reed, and National Reporter and Columnist for the Washington Examiner and about 15 other papers, Salena Zito. It's great to have you both here. This is a special edition of Perino on Politics. We usually do this on Mondays, but I wanted to schedule this regardless of how the debate turned out. But then last night, when I'm watching it, I usually take a lot of notes during a debate, and I wrote down at 9:12, I said, wow, Biden sounds horrible. At 9:13, I wrote down, this is going to be a long 90 minutes. At 9:17, I said, it's over. And It almost didn't matter what President Trump said or did after that, because the White House and the Biden campaign for months has been telling the American people and trashing Fox News, frankly, saying, you are cherry picking videos. You are doing cheap fake videos. Biden is actually really spry and super alert, and he's really running circles around us behind the scenes. And then Biden's the one who said, watch me. Remember on 60 Minutes, says, watch me. He wants to fight everybody. And he comes on, and it was scary. It was sad. It was upsetting. And that just scratches the surface. So you're on to give me your thoughts. Colin Reed, let me start with you. Your initial top line after last night.
Well, Dana, when you've got Tom Friedman weeping in his hotel room, and you've got Nick Kristof telling President Biden to drop out, and you've got the entire seemingly Democratic ecosystems conceding that the race is over and that there's no coming back from this, there's nothing that I or anyone else in the right of center ecosystem could say that could darken the night that President Biden had last night. He had a really low bar to clear, which is just show up, show the American people that he was all those things. His staff insisted to us for months that he was. Appear compos mentis, managed to form some sort of coherent attacks on President Trump's record, because that's the thing. You got two guys who have held the job before. There's plenty in the record to dissect and go through. But as you said, you couldn't even get to the substance. You couldn't even get to the policy. It didn't matter because his appearance was just so bad. And look, the White House made a calculated risk doing this debate so early. Maybe they thought if they had a night like this, it would give them some time to self-correct. I guess the issue is now he hasn't officially been nominated. So there's this eternity between now and August between when he actually gets the nomination to sort out. One thing I think is for sure, if he remains on the ticket, I don't think we're seeing a second debate in the fall. I can't imagine any circumstance after the bloodbath of last night. His team.
So yesterday morning, that would have been Thursday morning, I asked his deputy communications director, or maybe he's communications director for the campaign, Michael Tyler. He's a very good spokesperson. I said, will Biden commit to the September 10th debate no matter what happens tonight? He said, absolutely. And Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report tweeted last night, there's no chance of a second debate. But this morning, the Biden campaign is saying Biden is committed to the second debate. And I want to get to the Biden spin in a moment. But first, Salena, you did something very interesting last night when you watched. I would love to hear more about that.
So I watched with what our profession calls the double haters, right? These are the voters.
I call them the double dismayed, but yes, because I don't think they're hateful.
I do. So these were suburban Atlanta voters who voted for Trump the first time, and the second time either voted for Biden or just didn't show up at all. And we have to remember, in Georgia, there was so much chaos. These are Georgia voters, right? Think about it. It seems like forever ago, but the ones that went and voted for Biden, immediately he calls their new voting mechanism, what was it, 2.0, the Jim Crow 2.0, and they lose their not the World Series, but the All-Star game, right? And so Biden lost them early, and so, but they don't particularly care for Trump either. And so they went into this debate not particularly liking either, however, favoring Biden if he did a good job. Right? Something palatable, right? And out of all of them, only one is not voting, and they're all voting for Trump. And I need to stress this to you so emphatically. They don't like Trump. But these are also very, civic-minded people who, Rotary Club type people. So they believe that you should vote. And to your point, Dana, as you pointed down each moment in your reaction, I saw the same things in their reactions. The moment he came out of the gate, it was very uncomfortable. And I will say 2 pivot points for voters, even if Biden had not been bad, that really got under their skin, was his comments about Afghanistan and his comments about democracy and tens of millions of Trump voters who wouldn't support democracy, and that really got under their skin a lot.
Colin, I thought that President Trump, and I think this was a little bit of a strategy, he was reserved in his comments about Biden's performance. There was one moment where he said, I don't understand what he just said, and I'm not sure he does either. But he said it even more gently than I just did. And I thought that was an interesting way for him to just let the American people see what they see.
That's right. This is one of the only times, maybe the only time, that the American people were going to see President Biden without the handlers, without the safety net, out there, unscripted. And President Trump, the old saying, when your opponent's making a mistake, don't interrupt. And President Trump, for the most part, showed a level of restraint and discipline and deference on that. And in some ways, ironically, he really benefited from the CNN format of the mics being cut off because he couldn't get in the way even if he wanted to. So he was, for the most part. That line you mentioned, Dana, about President Biden not even knowing what he said, that might go down in presidential history up there with Reagan's line about not making fun of Walter Mondale's age or political inexperience for his own political gain. So that's one of those. That was the line that everyone's taking away. Obviously, that cuts at the core of President Biden's biggest vulnerability, which is 86% of people in most polls think he's too old. He did nothing to address that. That number is only going to be higher. But I think Salena hit a really important point. Voters in Atlanta suburbs, the Milwaukee suburbs, the Detroit suburbs, the Phoenix suburbs, the Philly suburbs, these are the voters that are up for grabs. And they went for Donald Trump in 2016, and they haven't voted for him or his party ever since. And that's why the Republicans have lost in 18, 20, and 22. So now here we are 8 years later. And because of this debate, because of how badly President Biden performed, they're up for grabs again. And they may swing back to President Trump, not because voters necessarily like him, but because he's, again, cleared. This is another race like 2016, where it's the candidate who's going to have the highest, lowest ceiling. In 2016, it was President Trump over Hillary Clinton. In 2020, it was Joe Biden over Donald Trump. In 2024, if this current trajectory holds, it might just be Donald Trump over Joe Biden.
Salena, one of the things Barry Weiss of the Free Press just wrote today is the headline is "They Knew." Yeah. And I'm wondering if any of those voters last night, were they aware of maybe what you and I cover this all the time? So we're like, no, we're seeing this with our own eyes, guys. Like, we can tell that Biden, for example, Robert Hur, the special prosecutor who wrote in his report, Biden is an elderly man with a poor memory, so much so that he could not be prosecuted because we could not actually get a jury to convict him because he would not be competent enough to stand trial. That's basically what they said. And the Justice Department has blocked the release of the audio. Imagine how bad that audio is. So where does Robert Hur and the Wall Street Journal and, frankly, Fox News go to get their apology? They knew. So I'm wondering if those voters, were they surprised, or did it just confirm sort of what they'd heard or suspected, that Biden's capacity and capability is not up to snuff? The other thing is they spent a week preparing Joe Biden and raising expectations about how he was going to take on Trump. They never once said, even yesterday morning, by the way, folks, Biden's come down with a cold. Everybody gets a cold. So don't be surprised if his voice is a little raspy. They didn't do that. So everyone, the first reaction that you have is like, what is wrong with him? Yeah,
the voters were insulted.
Okay.
I got that over and over again. They went in there knowing what they saw, but was hoping that it was just a couple off moments, but, previously, before the debate, a stumble, a stutter, whatever it may be. But, they went in there hoping, I would say the word is hoping that it wasn't true. And each voter said, my God, they lied to us. And then the other question then becomes, what else have they lied to us about? And that's, that's something when you get mad at a politician, you can come back, right? But if you lose trust in a politician, if you lose trust in the people around them, that's when you lose a voter permanently. And I don't think that that pollsters and maybe strategists quite understand that emotional connection of trust. And they lost voter trust last night. And so the question is, what happens next? And is there well, y'all are too young to remember this, but is there a Hugh Scott moment? Hugh Scott was the Pennsylvania senator, Republican, powerful Republican senator in August of 1974, who had to walk into the White House and tell Nixon it's time to go. Who has that ability? Who has that political courage? And we didn't see it today from Pennsylvania's elected officials. Both Josh Shapiro, who has earned great kudos for being this, sort of straight talker, right? And John Fetterman both dismissed the idea of calling for Biden to step down. And that goes against the grain of what I've heard from, if anybody reads me, knows I interview voters all over the country on all political stripes. I mean, Democrats were the one last night that were panicking and saying, my God, we need a different candidate. It was actually the Republican voters that kept texting me and saying, I feel really bad.
It was 18 months ago that there was a poll that said 75% of Democrats want a different choice.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. And we're back with more Perino on Politics. And Colin, before the break, we were talking about some of these party elders in the morning coming out and saying, just a bad night for Joe Biden. It's a fluke. He should carry on. It's no big deal. Trump was much worse. Trump lied. You had Hakeem Jeffries, who is the leader of the Democrats on the House side, say he should definitely stay as the nominee. Tim Walz, the Minnesota governor, said the same. Gretchen Whitmer said the same. Governor Newsom had the unenviable position of being in the spin room last night saying, yep, everything's fine here. Kamala Harris, in a scene straight out of Veep, had to go on and say, okay, actually, it wasn't a great night, but everything's fine. But if you look at the New York Times editorial page or a CNN panel, even some of the former staffers for Joe Biden, they're all saying, yeah, guys, we got to switch him out for somebody else. So what's going on, Colin? That's like the party elders are separating from the party in such a way that I don't know if they can put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Well, two quick points on that. One, but Salena made two great points before the break that I want to react to. One is about trust, and it's just so important, and she nailed it. You can't get past that. And in 2016, when I was knee deep in all this polling data on Trump versus Hillary Clinton, that was the issue where Hillary Clinton lost to Trump. Voters didn't trust her. The scandals, the ethical dilemmas, everything had just piled up, and they may not have liked what he was saying or doing, but they distrusted her, and it was a mountain she just couldn't get over. And then as it relates to what's going to happen next, look, there's this saying in politics, I guess it goes back to the founding of our country, actually, we'll either all hang together or we'll all hang separately. And there's this idea in these presidential elections that the team's got to stick together, because if you don't, you create divisions and then everybody loses. And that's true to a fault. But what I would be really closely watching is some of these Democratic incumbent senators in red states, places like Ohio, places like Montana, states where President Trump was probably going to win by 20, maybe more points. If he starts to win by 30 or more points, there is zero chance a Democratic incumbent senator like a Sherrod Brown in Ohio, like a John Tester in Montana can survive that tide. You will just get sucked underneath by the undertow. And so when those Democrat senators see this in their polling data, there is no interest like self-interest for a politician. And if there is someone other than Joe Biden's family and his wife who is going to make that hard call, it's going to be those representatives and those members of Congress who have zero chance of getting reelected in their red states. And who knows? Bob Casey, Salena may have a different point of view on this. Maybe Bob Casey in a few months, the race in Pennsylvania with Dave McCormick starts to get out of hand because Biden is just lagging by so badly. That's when the wall will start breaking. And that's when these Democratic senators will be out there saying, Mr. President, you have to go. And it won't come from people like me or people on the right side of the aisle saying he's old or senile or not up for the job. It'll be his own party. And that'll be when the dam starts to really start breaking.
Salena, on Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania was already going in the way of Donald Trump. He was already inching up. Every couple weeks he moved up a point in the election. And I think Bob Casey, but also the congressional members that are running in our state in tough districts like out in Western Pennsylvania, these guys are really, really going to have to do some soul searching. I don't think, as much as it would behoove Bob Casey to separate himself from Biden, I don't think he'll ever do it. They're too intrinsically tied because of the Scranton connection, because of the family connection. And that would be sort of Bob Casey's kryptonite in that moment. That's already a tight race. I've seen some internal polling that has it about 3 points with Casey ahead. If Trump starts to really pull away in Pennsylvania, as I suspect he was already doing, that's going to be spell a lot of trouble for Bob Casey. I don't know how you run against this guy if you're Bob Casey. Sherrod Brown, maybe, but
of Ohio.
Yeah, Sherrod Brown maybe can run away from Biden. He was already running for president in that primary. He dropped out before it became anything. So he has that ability, right? And he's going to really face a tough slog in that eastern Ohio, Mahoning Valley area, which was traditionally Democrat, that went hard and strong for Republican Bernie Moreno in the primary. People were shocked by how much Moreno was able to galvanize those former Democrats. Sherrod Brown needs those voters, and those voters were not happy last night.
Oh, I wanted to ask you this, and then we'll take a quick break. But one of the things to watch is how much money is raised after a campaign. The Biden campaign is saying they had their best hour ever, that they raised $14 million last night. I find it hard to believe. I'm like, who's writing checks? Okay. But the Trump team, I don't have their final number yet, but they said they did pretty well as well. But watch where they go. Okay. Where do they campaign? Right. And Biden's people have been for a week, and Biden is there today, Friday, the day after the debate, in Raleigh, North Carolina for a rally. And Trump is in Virginia. So North Carolina, Trump wins by, 0.2 of a point. Okay. So it's close in North Carolina. But I asked a good friend yesterday, Jonathan Feltz, who works, he used to work at the White House with us, and then he is still in North Carolina. I said, why are they in North Carolina? Does the Biden team have some sort of information I've not seen? And he said, well, his opinion is that the Biden team is looking at Georgia and Arizona and saying those are gone. So they're looking to find a red state that they could try to flip, and that North Carolina is the target. He believes that they're spitting in the wind, that it's not possible. But I wanted to ask you about that, Colin, because Trump is in Virginia. I know that you don't live in Virginia, but you can see it from your house, literally. So I'm curious what you think about where they go next and how these campaigns go, because we could spend time here trying to explain what it's like to do a brokered convention and how do you switch somebody out. There's going to be a lot of analysis on that. I'm frankly not well versed in it. I could read it to everybody, but let's save that for next week. Let's talk now about where they go to campaign.
Well, first on North Carolina, Dana, this cycle's fool's gold for Democrats. President Obama won it by the skin of his teeth in 2008 in a huge wave year as a transformational figure, and he barely won. Ever since then, it's drifted back to the right. So I get it. If you're an incumbent on the ropes, you got to find a place that you can play a little bit of offense. North Carolina ain't one of them. In terms of Virginia, look, is a popular governor, Glenn Youngkin, who won resoundingly a couple of years ago. It's a state where President Trump has struggled in the past. There's a lot of well-educated, wealthier D.C. exurbs where the majority of the population is, in places right across the river here that I can see from my window. And that's like that. If Virginia starts coming on the map, it's going to be a long night for the Biden campaign in November. But it's not just Virginia. There's been polls that have shown Minnesota a dead heat. That's even bluer than Virginia. New Hampshire, close to my backyard. That'll be a tough one. Not a lot of electoral votes. Hasn't gone for Republicans since George W. Bush a few election cycles ago. That's potentially in play. But it gets back to a fundamental point that set aside all the events of the last 24 hours. Just pretend the debate didn't happen. Even if we were sitting here looking at an electoral map and trying to stitch together the 270 electoral votes that get you into the White House, the map was always easier for President Trump than President Biden, based on which states are falling off the map and which ones are coming on. And President Biden's really only path at this point remains those big three states that Salena knows so well of Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And President Trump, on the other hand, he's got a lot of different roads he can drive in. He's got a lot of choose your own adventure of where he can play and not play. But President Biden, there's not a lot of red states. There's not even a lot of purple states, frankly, where he can go and make the credible claim that he's somehow going to turn this thing into a choice.
Yeah.
So if Joe Biden can't get those three states, it's over. That was true before last night. That's true right now. It's just right now it's a whole lot harder to see.
Salena, what candidates are going to want Biden to come campaign with them?
Does silence mean none?
Yeah.
It's going to be really, really difficult. I mean, I guess Josh Shapiro, he said it.
But he has, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, is so popular and has enough credibility in the bank that he could take a couple of those hits. Like he could make some withdrawals on his account. Right.
He won. I mean, Josh Shapiro won a ton of Trump voters. He won by almost 20 percentage points just less than 2 years ago. He's probably someone who can stand shoulder to shoulder with him. But there's not a lot of them that can. And that's sort of the challenge. And I get why Trump went to Virginia. Even if he's not going to win the state, it's signaling that he's saying everything is up for grabs now. Mm-hmm. That's what he's saying by going to Virginia. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite sure where I would have put Biden, but I'm sure this was already in the works. I'm not quite sure where I would have put Biden today. To do something, and it's a rally in North Carolina. I'm really struggling with that. I just got out of North Carolina. I was not seeing a surge of Biden support going into the debate, let alone after the debate.
One last quick question before we take our last break. Colin, the Trump campaign thinks that New Jersey right now is a possibility. Is that fool's gold for Republicans?
New Jersey's a pretty blue state. I'll say this: if that's even remotely true in in the fall, then we're headed toward wipeout proportions of an epic landscape. New Jersey's really blue. Democrats outnumber Republicans. There are pockets in South Jersey that lean red, but overall, that's going to be tough. But again, it gets to Selena's point: the fact that we're even having this conversation speaks to the fact that of what you want to do in some of these blue states. But I could think of better places to spend your time and money than convincing people that New Jersey's in play.
All right. We'll be right back. And we're back with Perino on Politics for our last segment here. This is where I ask the two of you to tell me what I'm missing, but maybe we project a little bit ahead. Given that we had such a, I would say, seismic event last night at the debate, what do you think you'll be paying attention to in the next few weeks? And I'm going to put a few dates on the calendar for you. We are right now June 28th. July 11th, President Trump will find out what his sentence is for that hearing in New York, that case in New York. On July 15th, the convention for the RNC starts. At some point, we'll have a vice presidential pick between now and then by President Trump. Then you get to August 7th. That's the date where the Democrats are supposed to have enough of their delegates to pull together to have Joe Biden as the nominee because of some Ohio situation. But anyway, so August 7th. And then about 10 days after that, we start the Democratic convention. So between today, the 28th, and then Salena, what are you paying attention to? And then we'll get Colin as a last word.
So mine's probably a little different than anyone else, but I'm just going to be talking and, more importantly, listening to voters. Going into places where people don't have an expectation that one or the other is going to earn their vote, and find out not just what they thought about the debate, but also find out what is still nagging them as they walk into the voting booth. I just think that and I've said this in so many columns through voters, there's still not a lot of discussion about how bad inflation is impacting people's lives. I am stunned at the Biden administration and their campaign people of not recognizing that. And I think that their biggest flaw going into last night in preparing him was not having some people around with him that actually lead a normal life. Right, you need to have someone in the room saying, "Look, my grandma is like struggling, like she's only 65, but she's still limited income, whatever." And so I'm just going to really just hunker down with people in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and North Carolina. That's basically where I'm going to be.
Okay, well, we know where to find you, Colin Reed.
Well, I'll be quick. There was no forward-looking vision last night, and that's a real disservice to the American people. These two men are running to be the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, and there was very little focus on the future and how to deal with these big issues. It was more relitigation of past grievances and then even golf scores.
Yeah, even when given an opportunity for final statements, they didn't do that.
Nope.
Right. So at some point, someone's going to lay out a vision. And hopefully they figure that out soon. The thing that of all those dates you mentioned, Dana, the one that's going to be now the highlight du jour of the summer is that Democrat convention. I think, and I agree with you, I think the machinations of replacing a candidate is not as easy. It's not like changing a pair of shoes. We'll have plenty of smarter people on the Democratic side explain that to us over the next few weeks. But even if they could do it, there's going to be a glaring spotlight on the just really shallow Democratic bench that they let Joe Biden, a guy who's about to turn 82 years old, get to this position to begin with. If they had a deep bench, if they had this ready, steady group of contenders who could jump in there and fill his shoes on day one, it would have already happened. So it's just going to be really interesting to watch those dominoes fall or not.
I'm going to be paying attention to the behind the scenes. And I know that I don't love anonymous sources. I don't. But when the recriminations about the First Lady, Jill Biden, start coming out about her pushing her husband, because did you see her on the MSNBC feed yesterday? Well, I guess it was on all channels. But
yep,
when she did the post party, she was saying to him, "You did so good. And you answered all the questions." I'm like, what in the heck is going on? And I know from some Democrats that they're already frustrated with her. And I think that's going to continue to grow. And if that does, it'll be something. I thought one of the things Trump could have done last night is to say, by the way, Mr. President, I will pardon your son. You don't have to do this. And that would have been quite a moment. But maybe we'll get there on September 10th if we get there to that debate. I've loved having you on. I usually like to end with some sort of question from social media, but frankly, we had so much breaking news with all the Supreme Court, I didn't even put out a tweet. So we will end it here. Thank you so much, Salena Zito, Colin Reed. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Dana.
Thank you, Dana. See you, Salena.
Bye, guys. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.